If you are looking for peace in your life, if you want to find guidance from Jesus and live a fulfilling life in faith, then this video is for you. Join us in praying, seeking guidance and unconditional love from Jesus in your life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family to spread the love of Jesus and help those who are looking for peace in their lives.
Calling from the heart in the storm. My beloved children, today we gather here, not under the bright sunshine of happy days, but perhaps in the darkness of trials, where each heart carries its own burdens, nameless pains, and unanswered questions. Who among us has not stood before a storm of life, when the cold wind blew, sweeping away what we loved, shaking our faith, and leaving us with a feeling of emptiness? Who has not felt their feet weary on the bumpy road, their hands trembling with no strength to grasp hope, and their eyes blurred by silent tears? I understand. My children, I feel it. Because I, a priest who has walked for 20 years under the shadow of the Savior's cross, have also been a pilgrim on the journey of faith, have faced dark nights of the soul, have wondered whether the light of God still shines in me. But it is precisely in those moments when all doors seem closed, when the howling wind drowns out the call of faith, that we find strength, not in our own strength, but in prayer, in the gentle presence of God, the source of all comfort and hope. Dear children, I invite you today to stop, to quiet your hearts, and to embark together on a journey of prayer. This is not a journey to escape from difficulties, nor is it a miracle that will dispel all suffering in an instant. No, the prayer we will offer together is a flame that lights the darkness, an anchor that anchors the boat of our lives in the midst of storms, and an open door for God to enter, bringing with it an inner strength that you may not yet recognize. I remember many years ago, when I was a young priest, newly ordained, I met a middle-aged man who came to church with a haggard face, his eyes sunken from months of fighting the illness of his beloved wife. He said to me, "Father, I don't know how to pray anymore. I have asked God to heal my wife, but she keeps getting weaker every day. I feel like God doesn't hear me." Those words were like a knife to my heart, because I knew that there was no easy answer that could ease his pain. But I took his hand, led him to the altar, and said, "My son, prayer is not just asking God to change the situation, but asking Him to change my heart so that I can find strength in this storm." We knelt, and in the silence of the church, he began to speak to God with simple words. "Lord, I am tired, but I want to believe that you are here." Just a simple sentence, but we see his shoulders gradually relax, as if an invisible burden has been lifted. From that day on, he went to church more often, not to ask for a miracle, but to find the strength to love and care for his wife until the last moment. My children, this story reminds us that prayer is not a tool to force God to do what we want, but a conversation from heart to heart, where we open ourselves to the one who is always listening. The Bible teaches us in Psalm 46 verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." Being still, that sounds so simple, but how difficult it is when our minds are in turmoil, when the worries of life are like waves that keep crashing. But it is in that silence that we will hear God whispering, not in loud words from above, but in gentle comfort deep in the soul. We have seen how many people have found strength through prayer. A single mother who, after losing her job, knelt down and asked God for guidance and found the courage to start again. A young man, lost in despair, found light when he dared to tell God about his wounds. These stories are not fairy tales, but living proof that God never abandons his children, even when we feel distant. Today, I invite you to embark on this journey with open hearts and outstretched arms. Imagine that we are standing in a vast field, surrounded by a raging storm, but in the midst of it, there is a safe place, the presence of God. Our journey of prayer will take us through concrete steps. First, we will learn to look the storm in the eye, to acknowledge our pain without hiding it. Then, we will raise our eyes to the cross, where Jesus transformed suffering into salvation. Then we will listen to God in the silence, letting Him show us the way. And finally, we will learn to surrender everything to Him, find joy in the midst of difficulties, and spread that strength to those around us. Every step is a prayer. Every prayer is a brick that builds the fortress of faith in our hearts. Dear children, I know that not all of us feel ready. Perhaps you have fresh wounds, unanswered questions, or unsettled fears. But I ask you to believe this. God does not ask you to be strong before you come to Him. He asks you to come as you are, weak, broken, yet yearning. Jesus Himself said, "Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11, verse 28. This invitation is not just for saints or perfect people, but for each of us right now. So, my children, let us begin. Take a deep breath. Let your worries subside. Close your eyes and imagine that you are standing before God, who looks at you with love. He does not judge, does not reproach, only opens His arms and waits. And in this moment, let us say to Him, "Father, I come to you with all that I carry. Teach me to pray, give me strength, and guide me through this storm." This is the beginning, simple but sincere, like a small seed that God will make grow into a strong tree of faith. Our journey has just begun, but we believe that, with God by our side, no storm can overwhelm us. Looking into the storm, acknowledging our pain. Dear children, as we have just said the first words of our journey of prayer together, as our hearts have opened slightly to the gentle presence of God, we realize that this journey cannot begin with haste or avoidance. No, my children, before we can lift our eyes to the cross or listen to the whispers of the Almighty, we must dare to stop and look deeply into the storm that rages within us. Like a sailor on a boat tossed by rough waves, we cannot find safe harbor if we keep pretending that the sea is calm. It is in the moment we acknowledge the storm, acknowledge our pain, our weakness, and our still bleeding wounds, that we open the door for God to enter, bringing with Him the light and strength we thought we had lost. Psalm 34, verse 18 reminds us of a profound truth. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. But how can He come close to us if we keep hiding our broken hearts, like a child hiding his bruised hands behind his back, afraid to let his parents see? Today, in the first part of this journey, we will learn together how to face pain, not to drown in it, but to place it in God's hands as a heartfelt prayer from the depths of our souls. Dear children, I would like to begin with a story that I have carried with me throughout my 20 years as a priest, a story about a woman who came to see me in the early days of my ministry in a small parish. She entered the church looking tired, her eyes red from months of pain. She sat down on the bench in front of me, and through sobs she told me that her husband had abandoned the family, leaving her with 3 small children and a debt so great that she did not know how to pay it. "Father," she said, her voice trembling like the wind blowing through dry branches, "I no longer have the strength to pray." I asked God for help, but He was silent. I felt as if He had abandoned me. Those words pierced my heart, because I knew that no simple words of comfort could ease her despair. But I did not rush to reply with empty phrases. Instead, I took her thin hands, led her to the altar, and said, "My dear child, God has not abandoned you. He is standing there in your pain, but you must invite Him in. Tell Him that you are broken, that you need Him." She looked at me, her eyes filled with doubt, but then she knelt down, and in the silence of the church, she began to speak with trembling words, "Lord, I am in pain. I don't understand why this is happening. I am tired, I am weak, I need you." Just a few simple words, not flowery, not polished, but I saw her face gradually light up, like the dawn breaking after a long dark night. That prayer did not immediately erase the debt, did not bring back her husband, but it did something more miraculous. It awakened in her an inner strength she did not know she possessed. From that day on, she began to get up, find a job, take care of her children, and every week she returned to church, not to ask for a miracle, but to thank God for being with her through the storm. My children, this story teaches us that the first step in prayer is not to ask God to take away our difficulties, but to dare to admit them before Him. We are often afraid to face our pain. We are afraid that if we speak out, if we admit that we are broken, we will be swept away by those same feelings. But the Bible shows us the opposite. Look at Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane when He faced the bitter cup of suffering. He did not hide His fear or His weakness. He knelt down and said to His Father, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup pass from me." Luke 22, verse 42. And on the cross, when all hope seemed lost, He cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27, verse 46. If the Savior, the only Son of God, dared to reveal His pain, why should we be ashamed to do the same? My children, acknowledging pain is not a sign of failure, but the beginning of healing. Just as a farmer must break the dry soil to sow seeds, we must break the hard shell of our hearts so that God can sow seeds of strength and hope. I remember another man, a father who lost his only son in a traffic accident. He came to me without saying a word, just sitting there with his hands clenched as if to crush the pain in his heart. I did not force him to speak, but I invited him to kneel before the statue of Jesus crucified. After a long silence, he burst into tears and said, "Lord, I can't bear it. I want my son back. I am angry with you. I don't understand why you let this happen." His words were bitter, angry, but also sincere. I don't blame him, because I know that God is not afraid of our questions, not afraid of our anger. He just wants us to bring everything to Him, whether it is joy or sadness, whether it is thanksgiving or a cry for help. And then, through those tears, he gradually found peace. He told me later, "Father, when I told you everything, I felt relieved. I no longer felt alone." You see, when we dare to look into the storm, when we dare to tell God about what is tearing us apart, we not only unburden ourselves, but also invite Him in to face it with us. Dear children, I know that this is not easy for all of us. Maybe you are carrying pain in your heart that you dare not speak about, not because you do not believe in God, but because you are afraid that speaking about it will make it more real. Maybe you are afraid that if you admit that you are weak, that you are broken, you will lose the last bit of strength to continue. But I ask you to trust me, to trust the words of God in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." It is when we are at our weakest, when we dare to expose our pain to God, that He can work in us, turning our tears into streams of grace. I have seen it in the lives of many people: a betrayed wife, a husband who loses his job, a child who has lost a loved one. All of them, when they dare to tell God about their storm, find the strength to move on. So, my children, let us practice this right now. Close your eyes, put your hand on your heart, and imagine that you are standing before God, who is looking at you with eyes full of love. He does not judge, does not blame, just waits for you to speak your heart. And start with simple words. "Father, I am facing this storm." Tell Him about your pain, whether it is loss, illness, or loneliness. "Father, my heart is broken by." Tell Him what hurts you most. "Father, I have no strength to go on." Confess your weariness. Don't be afraid that the words are too small or awkward. God doesn't need perfect speeches. He just needs your sincere heart. Let the words flow, like water washing away a wound, so that God can bind it and heal it. And when you're done, pause, take a deep breath, and feel His presence. This is the first step, my children, but it is the most important. Because when we dare to look into the storm, we are no longer alone. God is there, holding our hand, ready to lead us through the next stages of this prayer journey, towards the cross, finding strength in sacrifice. Dear children, when we dare to look into the storm together, when we place our pain, our weakness, and our wounds before God in a sincere prayer, we realize that the journey does not stop at acknowledging. No, my children, acknowledging is only the first step in opening our hearts, in breaking the hard shell of pride or fear, so that God can enter and lead us further. But where? Where to go in the midst of the storm that is still raging, in the midst of the waves that still threaten to sweep us away? We do not seek a distant shore or an instant miracle, but we seek a place closer, deeper, the cross of Jesus, where suffering is not the end, but the door to life, where weakness becomes strength, and where sacrifice opens the way to salvation. In this next part, we will look to the cross together, not to avoid pain, but to find meaning in it, to learn to carry our own cross as the Lord did, and to discover that true inner strength comes not from escaping difficulty, but from embracing it with faith and love. Let us continue, with open hearts, towards the one who sacrificed everything for us. Dear children, I would like to begin with an image that often comes to mind when I think of the cross, that of Jesus, suspended between heaven and earth, his body bleeding, his hands nailed to the nails, and his eyes raised to his Father in wordless prayer. I used to wonder, during my early years as a priest, why he did not choose an easier path. Why did the one who had the power to stop the wind and the waves allow himself to suffer such pain and humiliation? But then, through hours of silent prayer, through rereading the gospel, we understand that the cross is not a defeat, but a victory. The victory of love over hatred, of life over death, of strength over weakness. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when his sweat fell like drops of blood, he prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done," Luke 22, verse 42. And on Golgotha, when all the disciples fled, when the crowd mocked him, he still exclaimed, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit," Luke 23, verse 46. My children, that is the first lesson that the cross teaches us. Strength does not lie in defeating the enemy or changing circumstances, but in sacrifice, in absolute trust in the Father's will, even when that path leads through the valley of darkness. I remember a man I met many years ago, a war veteran with a haggard face and broken legs. He came to me on a rainy afternoon, his wheelchair creaking on the church floor. He didn't say much, just looked at me with sorrowful eyes, and then he asked, "Father, why do you let me suffer like this? I lost my legs in the war. I lost my dream of a normal life. I don't see any meaning anymore." Those words weighed heavily on my heart, because I knew that no simple answer could ease his pain. I didn't rush to answer, didn't offer empty words of comfort. Instead, I invited him to come with me to the large cross in the church, where Jesus hung with his arms outstretched. I pointed to him and said, "Look, my son, Jesus suffered, was crucified, and felt loneliness. But he did not stop at pain. He turned the cross into a source of salvation for the whole world. Your cross, your lost legs, is not the end, but the door for God to do miracles in your life." He was silent, his eyes fixed on that image, and then I invited him to pray with me. We knelt down, me on the stone floor, him in the wheelchair, and he began to pray to God, "Jesus, you suffered more than I have. Give me your strength to bear my cross." The prayer was not long, not flowery, but powerful. From that day on, he no longer complained. He began to reach out to other veterans, sharing his story, using his own pain to support them. You see, his cross did not disappear, but it became a source of strength, because he learned to look toward the cross of the Lord. Dear children, I know that it is not easy for all of us to look at the cross and find meaning. You may be thinking, "Father, my cross is too heavy. I am not Jesus. I do not have that strength." I understand, because I have felt the same way. Many years ago, when I lost a dear friend, a priest who accompanied me in my early days, I sat in the chapel, looked at the cross, and asked myself, "Lord, why did you take away someone I loved? How can I bear this pain?" But then, in the silence, I heard a gentle voice in my heart. "Look at me. I carried the cross for you, so that you would not have to carry it alone." And I realized that the cross is not a burden I have to carry alone. Jesus carried the heaviest part, the part of sin, of despair, so that I could carry only my part with him. Paul wrote in Galatians 2 verse 20, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. When we look at the cross, we see not only pain, but also love, the love of the one who gave everything so that we could rise again. I remember another woman, a mother who lost her baby to illness. She came to me, clutching the baby's picture frame, and cried, "Father, I can't bear it. This cross is too much. I want to give up." I sat with her, listening to her sobs, and then I told her about Mary, the mother of Jesus. I said, "My child, think of Mary standing at the foot of the cross, watching her only son die. She didn't run away. She didn't curse. She just stood there, bearing pain greater than any of us can imagine. But she had strength because she believed that the cross was not the end. She looked up, tears still falling, but there was a light in her eyes. I invited her to pray, 'Lord, give me the strength of Mary to stand firm under my cross.' And little by little, she found the courage to continue living, not to forget her child, but to love the people who remained in her life. Her cross was still there, but it was no longer a crushing burden, but a sign of love and hope. My children, the cross is not always such a great loss. Sometimes it is small but persistent difficulties, a tiring day at work, a broken relationship, a silent fear. Whether big or small, every cross has meaning when we lay it at the feet of God. I once met a young man who was ridiculed by his friends for his faith. He came to me and said, "Father, I want to give up. I am not strong enough to bear these insults." I asked him, "Do you remember Jesus being mocked on the cross?" He did not respond with anger, but with love. And I invited him to pray, "Lord, give me the strength to love even when I am hated." He did, and little by little, he not only overcame mockery, but also became a living witness to those around him. So, my dear children, let us turn to the cross right now. Imagine yourselves standing at the foot of the cross, looking up at Jesus. He is not distant, not lofty. He is there, with his arms nailed to the cross, but still outstretched to embrace you. And say to him, "Jesus, teach me to carry my cross as you do. Show me meaning in suffering and strength in weakness. Be with me so that I do not walk alone." Say those words, or any words that come from your heart. Do not fear that your cross is too small or too great. With God, every cross is worth it. When we turn to him, we not only find the strength to bear it, but we also see the light of the resurrection beyond the darkness of Friday. This is the power of the cross, my children, the power of sacrifice, of love, and of the belief that God is always with us, even in our darkest hours. Listening to God strengthens silence. Dear children, when we dare to look into the storm of our hearts, when we lift our eyes to the cross and find strength in the sacrifice of Jesus, we realize that the journey of prayer is not just about speaking, not just about bearing the burden, but also about stopping to listen. My children, we often think that prayer is about offering up to God our petitions, our pains, or our thanksgivings, but we forget an equally important part: silence. In that silence, we open our hearts to hear God's voice, not a loud voice from above, not a roar that drowns out the storm, but a gentle whisper, like a gentle breeze, that touches the depths of our souls. The Bible tells us that when the prophet Elijah was fleeing in the desert, he did not find God in the strong wind, in the earthquake, or in the fire, but in a small whisper, 1 Kings 19 verse 12. Today, in the next part of this journey, we will learn together how to listen to God, to find inner strength in silence, strength that comes not from the noise of the world, but from the silent presence of the one who is always with us. Let us enter into that silence with a willing heart and open ears to hear what he has to say to each of us. Dear children, I would like to begin with a story that I have carried in my heart since my early days as a priest, a story about myself when I was young and did not fully understand the meaning of silence. Many years ago, I went through a period when my faith was shaken. A close friend, a priest who accompanied me in the early days of my ministry, passed away suddenly from a serious illness. That loss was like a knife cutting into my heart. I prayed, I cried, I asked God, "Lord, where are you? Why did you let such a good person go?" But there seemed to be no answer. I felt like I was standing in a dark room, corridor with the walls of silence pressing down on me. One night, unable to bear the emptiness, I entered the small chapel of the parish, knelt before the altar, and instead of continuing to ask questions, I decided to be silent. I said nothing, asked nothing, just sat there, letting my heart settle. And then, in that silence, I heard a gentle voice within me, not in words, but in a deep feeling. Trust in me. Not a long explanation, not a brilliant miracle, just a simple but powerful invitation. That voice did not take away the pain, but it gave me the strength to go on, to believe that God was still working, even when I did not understand his intentions. My children, that was the first time I realized that inner strength comes not only from talking to God, but also from listening to him in silence. Have you ever wondered why silence is so difficult? In today's world, we are surrounded by noise, the noise of work, of worries, of our inner fears. We run from one thing to another, from one pain to another, and we think that if we stop, if we allow ourselves to be silent, we will be swept away. But Jesus taught us the opposite. Remember the times he withdrew from the crowds, went up the mountain alone to pray. Matthew 14, verse 23. He did not run away. He was not afraid, but chose silence to listen to his Father, to find strength for the mission ahead. If the Savior needed those moments of silence, how much more so do we, weak human beings? I remember a young woman, a teacher, who came to me exhausted. She worked tirelessly, took care of her family, and tried to keep everything perfect, but inside she felt a great void. She said, "Father, I pray every day, but I don't feel God there. I don't know what I'm doing wrong." I looked at her, saw the tired eyes of someone who has been running for too long without stopping, and I said, "My child, you've been talking to God, but are you listening to him? Try stopping just for a moment and let him speak to you." I invited her to sit in church, close her eyes, and just breathe. No asking, no thinking, just letting her heart settle. After a few minutes, she opened her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she said, "Father, I feel like God is holding me." I hear him say that I don't have to be perfect. You see, in the silence, God was whispering to her, giving her the strength she couldn't find in the busyness. Dear children, silence is not emptiness, but a sacred space where God can speak to us. But we must learn to enter that space. We are often afraid of silence because in silence we have to face ourselves, our fears, our wounds, our unanswered questions. But it is precisely in this face-to-face that God comes to us. I once met a man, a successful businessman, who was haunted by a feeling of loneliness. He came to me and said, "Father, I have everything, money, family, career, but I feel empty. I pray, but I don't hear anything." I asked him, "Have you ever been truly silent before God?" Not to ask, not to tell, but just to listen. He shook his head, admitting that he was always in a hurry, always busy. I invited him to try something simple. Every day, spend 5 minutes sitting in silence. No phone, no thoughts, just opening his heart to God. A month later, he returned, his face brighter, and said, "Father, I began to hear you. Not in words, but in a peace within me. I realized that you don't want more money, but more love." The silence opened a door for him where God could whisper the words he needed to hear. My children, I know that silence is not easy, especially when the storm inside us is still raging. You may be thinking, "Father, how can I be silent when I am in pain, when I am worried, when I don't know what tomorrow will bring?" I understand, because I have been there too. But remember the words of Jesus in John 10, verse 27. "My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me." God is calling you by name right now, but to hear him, we must silence the noise. Not just the noise outside, but the noise inside. I saw this in the life of a young man, a boy who had lost his way in the temptations of the world. He came to me, saying that he no longer believed in God, that he did not see him in this life full of injustice. I did not argue, did not persuade, but simply invited him to try something. Every night, before going to bed, sit quietly for a minute and say to God, "Lord, if you are there, please talk to me." He did so, although at first it was only out of curiosity. But a few weeks later, he returned, saying, "Father, I don't know how to explain it, but I began to feel different. In the silence, I felt as if someone was listening to me." The whisper of God touched him, not miraculously, but with a silent but powerful presence. So, my dear children, let us practice this right now. Find a small corner in your heart where there is no noise of worries, of fears. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and say to God, "Father, speak to me in the silence. Let me hear your voice in the midst of the storm. Teach me to trust, even when I cannot see." No need to say much, no need to find the perfect words. Just open your heart, like a child in the arms of its parent, and let God whisper to you. Perhaps you will hear a word of comfort, a word of encouragement, or just a sense of peace. Whatever it is God's voice, calling you back to the inner strength He has placed within each of you. This silence, my children, is the gift of prayer, the gift that helps us find God, and through it, find ourselves. And trusting to God, putting everything in His hands. Dear children, when we have learned to look into the storm, to lift our eyes to the cross, and to listen to God in the silence, we come to a new fork in the road of prayer, a fork that requires us to let go, not to abandon, but to entrust. My children, after having offered our pain to God, after having found strength in His sacrifice and peace in His gentle whisper, we are faced with a profound question. Will we hold on to those burdens in our hands, or will we entrust them to the one who can bear them all? Entrusting is not a weak surrender, not an evasion of responsibility, but an act of trust, believing that God not only sees our pain, but has a plan that goes beyond what we can understand. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus said to the Father, "Not my will, but yours be done," Luke 22 verse 42, and on the cross, He entrusted His Spirit into the Father's hands, Luke 23 verse 46. Today, in this next section, we will learn together how to surrender everything to God, to find inner strength not from control, but from surrendering to His love and will. Let us walk together with open arms and a heart ready to surrender. Dear children, I would like to begin with a story I witnessed many years ago, a story about a mother I will never forget. She came to me on a rainy afternoon, her trembling hands clutching a small shirt, the shirt of her son, whom she had just lost to a serious illness. She sat down in front of me, tears streaming down her haggard face, and she said, "Father, I can't let go." I thought if I prayed hard enough, if I held on tight enough, God would give my son back to me. But now, I don't know what to do. Those words were like an arrow piercing my heart, because I understood that her pain was not just loss, but also the struggle between the desire to control and the helplessness of God's will. I did not rush to answer, did not offer easy words of comfort. Instead, I invited her to kneel with me before the altar, where the crucifix stood tall, and I said, "My child, God is not asking you to forget your child. He is asking you to entrust Him to Him, to care for Him in His loving arms, and to care for you for the rest of your days." She looked at me, her eyes filled with doubt, but then she nodded, and we began to pray. She said to God, her voice choking with tears, "Lord, I entrust my son to you. I don't know why, but I believe you love him more than I do. Please hold him in your hands, and please hold me so that I can continue to live." When she finished speaking, I saw her shoulders shaking, but not because of pain, but because an invisible burden had been lifted. From that day on, she no longer lived in torment, but began to find peace, believing that her son was being held by God, and so was she. My children, this story teaches us that entrusting is not giving up hope, but placing that hope in God's hands. We often think that power lies in holding, in controlling, in solving everything ourselves. But the Bible shows us another way. Remember Abraham, who was called by God to offer up Isaac, his beloved son, Genesis 22. When he led Isaac up the mountain, when he bound him to the altar, his heart must have broken. But he did not turn away, did not keep Isaac to himself. He entrusted his son to God, trusting that God had a bigger plan. And God responded to that trust, not by taking Isaac's life, but by giving Abraham a future beyond what he could have imagined. You see, when we entrust, we do not lose, we receive, not always in the way we expect, but in the way God knows is best. I once met a man, a father, who lost his job during hard times. He came to me and said, "Father, I have done my best, but I cannot feed my family anymore. I feel like a failure." I asked him, "Do you dare entrust your family to God? Not to abandon responsibility, but to trust that He will lead the way." He agreed, and we prayed, "Lord, I entrust my family to you. Please take me where you want me to go." Within weeks, he found a new job, not because he was in control, but because he let go and let God do the work. Dear children, surrendering is not easy, especially when we are in the midst of a storm. We fear that if we let go, everything will collapse. We fear that if we surrender, God will not do as we wish. But look at Mary, the mother of Jesus. When the angel Gabriel announced to her that she would give birth to the Savior, she did not fully understand God's plan, did not know that the path would lead to the cross. But she said, "I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word." Luke 1 verse 38. She surrendered completely, holding nothing back, and from that surrender, salvation came to the world. I remember a young girl, a student, who came to me when she was faced with a big decision, to give up her dream of studying abroad to stay and care for her sick mother. She cried, "Father, I do not want to give up, but I cannot abandon my mother either." I told her, "My child, entrust your dream to God. He knows what is best for you." She knelt down and said, "Lord, I entrust my future to you. Lead me according to your will." And miraculously, a few months later, she received a scholarship that allowed her to study online, pursue her dream, and be with her mother. Her entrustment was not a loss, but a new path. My children, I know that entrusting is a difficult step because it requires us to let go of the control we often cling to. We want to make things happen for ourselves, to know for sure that tomorrow will be okay. But Jesus taught us that true strength lies not in control, but in trust. In Matthew 6 verse 34, he said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Each day has its own troubles. When we surrender, we do not abandon responsibility, but we place it in the hands of someone greater than ourselves. I once met a woman, a wife who had been betrayed by her husband. She came to me and said, "Father, I don't know how to forgive, how to move on. I want to hold on to this pain to protect myself." I said to her, "My child, surrender your pain to God. He will help you forgive, not by your strength, but by His grace." She prayed, "Lord, I surrender my pain to you. Please heal me." And gradually, she found the strength to forgive, not because her husband deserved it, but because she believed that God would bring justice and peace. So, my dear children, let us practice surrender right now. Close your eyes and imagine that you are standing before God with your burdens in your hands, be it pain, anxiety, or a difficult decision. Imagine placing them in His hands, like a child entrusting a beloved toy to a parent. And say to Him, "Father, I entrust, name your burden, to you. I don't understand it all, but I believe you love me. Please do your will in my life." Say those words, or whatever words come to your heart. As you do, feel the relief, like a bird released from its cage. This is the power of entrustment, my children, the power of trust, of surrender, and of the hope that God will carry us through the storm, in His way, in His time. Joy in trials, strength over suffering. Dear children, when we have learned to look into the storm, to lift our eyes to the cross, to listen to God in the silence, and to entrust everything to Him, we come to an unexpected turn in our journey of prayer, the turn of joy. My children, you may be asking yourself, joy? How can there be joy when the storm is still raging, when the cross is still heavy on our shoulders, when the pain has not yet disappeared? But I ask you to listen, because the joy I speak of today is not the superficial joy of the world, not the loud laughter when everything goes smoothly, but a deep joy, a lasting joy, born of the belief that God is at work even in our greatest trials. St. Paul, who endured imprisonment, flogging, and hardship, wrote in Philippians 4 verse 4, "Rejoice in the Lord always." I will say it again, rejoice. Today, in this next part, we will explore together how to find joy in the midst of trials, so that our inner strength will not only help us stand firm, but also help us dance in the rain, believing that every drop of water is a gift from God. Let us walk together, with our hearts open and our eyes fixed on the light ahead. Dear children, I would like to begin with a story about a woman I met many years ago, a person I called a light in the darkness. She was a widow who lived in a small village where I used to minister. Her husband had died in an accident, leaving her with 5 children and a barren plot of land that was not enough to feed her family. When I met her, I expected to see a sad face, a broken heart, but instead I saw a smile, not a forced smile, but a smile as bright as the morning sun. I asked her, "My daughter, how can you be happy in the midst of such hardships?" She looked at me, her eyes sparkling, and said, "Father, I have lost my husband. I have lost my security, but I have not lost God. Every day I pray and I feel Him with me. I am happy that my children are alive, that I have hands to work, and that I know that God is taking care of us." Those words stunned me because I realized that her joy did not come from external circumstances, but from a deep source within, a source of faith and gratitude. She did not deny her pain, did not pretend that everything was easy, but she chose to look at what she had left, rather than what she had lost. From then on, we called her the light, because she illuminated a lesson for us. Joy in trials is not to deny suffering, but to rise above it with faith. My children, I know that talking about joy in trials can be confusing. How can we be joyful when our hearts are broken, when life seems to be filled with darkness? But look at Paul and Silas in prison, Acts 16 verse 25. Chained and beaten, they did not cry, they did not curse, but sang hymns of praise to God in the middle of the night. Their joy did not come from comfort, but from the presence of God in their hearts. I remember a young man, a musician, who came to me when he had lost the ability to play his instrument because of an accident that injured his hands. He said, "Father, music has been my whole life. Now, I don't know who I am anymore." We sat with him, listening to his pain, and then we said, "My son, you have lost your hands to play the harp, but you still have a voice to sing, a heart to love. Give what you have left to God, and He will give you new joy." He looked at us, doubtful, but then he agreed to pray with us. We said, "Lord, I have lost what I love, but I give you what I have. Give me joy in this trial." And miraculously, he began to sing, not with his hands, but with his voice. He composed hymns, using his pain to lift others, and he told me later, "Father, I find joy, not in playing the harp, but in singing to God." Dear children, joy in trials is not something that comes naturally. It requires us to look beyond the pain, to see the small graces that God gives us every day. Think of Mary at the foot of the cross. She stood there, watching her only son die. Her heart must have broken. But she did not break down, did not despair, because she believed that God would turn suffering into life. And He did. Easter came, bringing with it joy beyond all imagination. I once met a woman, a single mother, abandoned by her husband when her baby was still in her womb. She came to me and said, "Father, I don't know how to feed my child. I just want to give up." I asked her, "My child, do you see the miracle that God has given you? The child in your womb is a gift, a reason for joy." She was silent, then nodded, and we prayed, "Lord, thank you for this child. Give me the joy to raise him in your love." From then on, she began to see life differently. She worked hard, raised him, and every time she saw me, she said, "Father, I am glad I have a son, even though my life has not been easy." My children, this joy does not mean that we deny our hardships. No, we still cry, we still hurt, we still get tired, but we choose not to let them define us. James writes, "Consider it pure joy whatever trials you face." James 1 verse 2. Why? Because trials test us, make us stronger, and bring us closer to God. I remember a man, a construction worker, who lost his job when his company went bankrupt. He came to me and said, "Father, I don't know how to go on. I feel useless." I told him, "My son, this trial is not to destroy you, but to build something new in you. Thank God for your health, for your family." He prayed to me, "Lord, I thank you for what I have. Give me the joy to start again." And he did. He learned a new trade, found another job, and told me, "Father, I am glad I did not fall." So, my dear children, join me in finding joy right now. Close your eyes, think of a trial in your life, big or small. Now, find something small that you can be thankful for, a loved one, a new day, a breath. And say to God, "Father, I thank you for what I choose. Give me joy in the midst of this trial so that I can overcome it with your love." Say those words and feel the gentle joy rising in your heart. This is the power of joy, my children. The power to overcome suffering, not to forget it, but to transform it into a song of praise to God. Spreading strength, bringing light to others. Dear children, as we have walked together through the journey of looking into the storm, looking up at the cross, listening to God, entrusting everything to Him, and finding joy in the midst of trials, we come to a final crossroads, the crossroads of sharing. My children, the inner strength that we have found through prayer is not a gift to be kept for ourselves, like a lamp hidden under a bushel, but a light to be placed on a high stand, illuminating those around us. Jesus said in Matthew 5, verse 16, "Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." Having been lifted up, healed, and given joy by God, we cannot remain in our own silence. We are called to stand up and bring that strength to our brothers and sisters who are lost in their storms. Today, in this section, we will explore together how to spread inner strength, to become living witnesses of God's love, not only by words, but by actions, by presence, and by an open heart. Let us walk together, carrying the flame of faith to light up the world. Dear children, I would like to begin with a story that I witnessed not long ago, a story about a simple man who became a light for the whole community. He was a car mechanic living in a poor neighborhood which I visited. Many years ago, he lost his little daughter to an illness, and the pain almost made him collapse. But instead of sinking into despair, he went to church, knelt before God, and through days of prayer, he found the strength to stand up. When we met him, we saw a man who not only overcame his pain, but also used it to help others. He opened a small garage, not only repairing cars, but also repairing broken hearts. He provided free services to families who could not afford it, spent time talking to those who were in despair, and told them how God had lifted him up from the darkness. One day I asked him, "My son, what made you do all this?" He smiled, his eyes lit up, and said, "Father, God gave me the strength to overcome loss." I couldn't keep it to myself. I wanted others to know that they too could find the light. You see, the strength he received from God not only saved him, but also became a spreading fire, warming those around him. My children, we often think that to spread strength, we have to do great things, build churches, preach to thousands, or perform miracles. But God doesn't ask us to do things beyond our capabilities. He asks us to use what we have, however small, to bring light to others. Think of the Samaritan woman at the well, John 4. After encountering Jesus and being touched by him, she did not keep her joy to herself. She ran back to her village, told everyone about the one who had changed her life, and through her testimony, the whole community came to God. I once met a young girl, a shopkeeper, who came to me in sadness because her friends had deserted her. She prayed with me, found strength in God, and then decided not to keep her joy to herself. She began to write little letters, sending words of encouragement to those she met, a thank you to the delivery man, a blessing to a coworker. She said to me, "Father, I don't have much, but I want to share the little light that God has given me." And miraculously, those letters changed the atmosphere in the shop, bringing smiles to those who had been cold to her. Dear children, spreading strength is not something only for those who have overcome difficulties. Even when we are still in the storm, we can still be light. I remember a woman, a cancer patient, who came to church in her last days. She was very weak, but every time she came, she brought a smile and a word of encouragement to others. One day, I asked her, "My child, you're in pain, so how can you still comfort others?" She held my hand and said, "Father, I pray every day and God gives me the strength to endure." I don't want to keep it to myself. I want others to see that even in sickness, God is still there. She passed away not long after, but her light remains. People who were comforted by her came to me, saying that they had found faith through her resilience. You see, inner strength is not just for us to stand firm, but for us to lift others up, even when we ourselves are weak. My children, I know that not all of us feel ready to spread our strength. You may think, "Father, I am struggling with myself. How can I help others?" But remember the words of St. Paul in 2 Corinthians 1 verse 4. He comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those who are in trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. The strength that God gives us is not for us to hold on to, but for us to share, and by sharing, we receive more. I once met a man, a father who had lost his job, who came to me in despair. After praying and surrendering to God, he found the strength to start over. But he did not stop there. He began to help other unemployed people in the parish, sharing his experience, teaching them how to overcome difficulties. He said to me, "Father, when I help them, I feel stronger." I realized that God not only saves me, but also uses me to save others. You see, when we radiate power, we don't lose it, we multiply it. So, my dear children, let's practice radiating it right now. Think of someone in your life, a friend, a loved one, or a stranger who needs light. Imagine that the power that God has given you through prayer is a small candle. Now say to God, "Father, thank you for the strength you have given me. Please use me to bring light to name of person. Please teach me to love and support them as you have done for me." Then think of a small action you can do, a kind word, a hug, a prayer for them. It doesn't have to be big, just sincere. This is the power of diffusion, my children. The power that transforms us from recipients of grace into givers of grace, from single lamps into a starry sky, illuminating the darkness of the world.